Okay, so the first thing is where and how to grip the nunchuck. I can grip anywhere along the nunchuck, the end, the center, or the rope edge, okay? And the reason this will shift is, say, if I need more room and space to catch the chuck as I swing it around my arms, then it's kind of easier to grip it towards the end here, okay? And I get more space, and that's easier to catch. As I creep up towards the rope, this allows me more control and space to wield two nunchucks at the same time. That's why you see me flipping this hand around. It also shortens the distance from me to my attacker, and that's another thing to be aware of, that if I grip down here, I have more length to reach with when I'm attacking. And the way you can work where you handle the nunchuck is that you're not just stuck in one position. As I swing and I say do a trap, that's what this is called, I can immediately re-grip if I want to do something else. Or I can re-grip lower so that I can do this. And one of the reasons I would re-grip lower is it helps when I'm going around large portions of my body here, okay? This is a much larger area to cover, and you can see even where I grab here, it's towards the end. And so that I'm really maximizing the length. Another more advanced way to control your grip is that as I'm swinging, I'm developing centrifugal force here, or I have centrifugal force at work here. And so if I just allow the pull of centrifugal force, you can see I can work the nunchuck down to the end. So as I'm swinging, I can decide I want a little more length, and then go to my catches, whether they be there or around here. Crawling back up requires a little more practice, but I can crawl up to the rope edge as I swing. And it doesn't matter which way I go, whether I go forward and crawl back up, or go backwards and creep down, or crawl back up. And these are things to work on in terms of dexterity and coordination. So that is how you will change your grip and manipulate your grip throughout the swinging and use of the nunchuck. It's not a hard, fast rule, but if the rope on your nunchuck is about that long so that it spans your hand width, that's about right. That's a good place to start from. A lot of competition people have this really short rope, and it's really so that they don't have to do all of this manipulating of their hand on the device. It's just set in one position, and they know their moves, and they're wielding double nunchucks, and they're shiny, and they're glinting light, and it looks cool. But it's really something that has been fine-tuned for performance. This is something that is just normal. You'll find this stock anywhere you go, or if you make these, it's easy to make them like this, however many different ways that you decide to do that. But that's going to give you the most options for manipulating this. Like I said, I pinch the rope when I'm doing double so that I have a little bit more space on each side. It's hard to do double when you can, but when you're holding down towards the edge here, you're now overlapping space a lot. So that's why you see people wanting to use the shorter rope, or me pinching in like that. But I'm going to tell you that that's a good thing to do so that when we get into advanced stuff, you can do moves like this as well. I'm using the centrifugal force to spin this chuck really tight so that it becomes like a stick, and it just rotates around my hand really easily for these techniques. Now these are more flashy techniques. This is not something you're going to do if you're in any kind of self-defense situation, but it's very rare you're going to be in a self-defense situation with nunchucks anyway. So we'll cover this stuff. They're fun. You can do them on both hands at the same time, but you can't do them unless you have something that's at least hand width apart in terms of rope length. Okay, so before we start swinging, let's cover some principles about how the swing works. Here's how this works. I can't just change direction anywhere in space. I'm not going to have any control. I have to use and work with centrifugal force. So I'm using centrifugal force when I am swinging this. Okay, there's a pull that I feel on the nunchuck from the centrifugal force pulling on the rope and wanting to pull it out of my hand. Remember, that's why I can relax my hand and let it crawl out. And then I have to work a little bit to crawl it back in. So with that centrifugal force from doing these exercises and swinging it around a lot, you'll start to feel where that is, so you can control this not whenever you want, but close to whenever you want, okay? Because you still have to work with the centrifugal force, you see as I slow this down, to keep that tension on that rope so that I have a strike that actually can be effective, and I have control of this weapon. It's not just bouncing around in here. So centrifugal force, very important. That's what we're working with. Now, as we swing the device, I can hold here, I can hold here, I can hold here, it doesn't matter. I like to usually hold about right somewhere in the middle, okay? Whatever's comfortable for you. And we're gonna make a circle. So I'm putting my right hand towards you because the first and easiest circle to make is a backward circle. See, I'm drawing a circle backwards, I'm swinging it backwards, okay? Now, to slow this down, to control it, I can't stay in the circle and just stop, it still wants to go, okay? And that's when you get those kinds of mistakes. So I need to make an ellipse. Okay, so I'll do that again. Ellipse. I go from this tight circle to a drawing out an ellipse, and what that does is that extra distance it's starting to travel now allows me to slow it down and still keep that tension on the rope. So backward circle, ellipse to slow down. Now I can go forward. That's the other one. Forward circle. Ellipse, backward circle. You can ellipse all kinds of ways. See, this is just me using my wrist to ellipse. Okay, and you notice I have to let my arm travel a little bit, or I can use my arm to ellipse. It doesn't matter. You will use what you need and develop it per your comfort and your needs as you swing this around. Okay, I know that sounds a little bit loose, but that's the way to think about this. Make this work for you. Don't try to make yourself conform to too much conception. That's it. Now, if I turn and face you, it becomes a propeller swing. It's still the same forward swing. And if I slow down and I go this way, right, the backward swing, it's still the same backward swing. It's just swinging to the right. Ellipse to slow down. Ellipse to slow down. Okay? So that's backward swing, forward swing, sideways to the right, and sideways to the left on the propeller swing. They're actually the same two swings. Okay, so the next swing is this helicopter swing. Now notice, I'm not really, you can do this once you have control. Okay, you have to watch out because it's going to bounce all over the place, which is why we train with the foam nunchucks. But this is kind of like I'm swinging a lasso. I like to keep it a little bit more in the wrist. Now this is what I was going to say earlier. You can swing at the elbow. It gets a little bit long and wild. When you swing at the wrist, you have a little bit more efficiency and flow. Okay, and then I can reach out. I can reach out when I want to make my elongated strike. Okay, so back to this. So we're here, and we're swinging, and I slow down there. If you look at it from the top view, I'm still making an ellipse, but from this side view, it looks like I'm just dropping it down here like this. Just dissipating the energy, decelerating, okay? That is helicopter. So we have propeller, we have helicopter, and we have backward swing. Did you see how I was decelerating that very sort of subtly, very subtly as I wanted to show? And I'm just aware of where the chuck is so that I can manipulate it how I want, seemingly effortlessly. That's the skill I want you to develop just from doing these circles. The other circle is going to be on this side, okay? And the reason you would swing across your body is because we will be doing a lot of techniques where you're doing this figure eight, and you need to be comfortable swinging on both sides of your body, because you'll be striking and striking like this. This is a very basic, important strike, this X strike, and you'll need to circle back away from this side. So, forward circle, and you can see it's a forward circle, okay? Decelerate. Backward circle, decelerate. When I swing that towards you, forward circle, decelerate, backward circle, decelerate. So those are all the circles that you want to practice and get comfortable with before we start putting them together in combination. Now, one thing you can do as you get really good is, if I didn't cover this already, you can make a bunch of circles and decelerate, or as you get good, you see I'm whipping, and I'm just decelerating in one stroke here. My personal favorite is to add a stroke, just one circle in between. It just has an aesthetic look, but also there's a little control there, and I can control the chuck a little bit better. Okay, let's cover figure eights. Figure eights are just a little bit higher up in complexity than the single circles, okay? So the first figure eight you can think about is just making a forward circle, and then on the upswing here, cross, and now you're making a forward circle on this side. Now, because you've practiced forward circles this way and forward circles this way, you're going to be comfortable making this transition, okay? And you can hang out there for a little bit and then cross back. And you can think of your figure eight as just crossing over. Whenever you're ready, right there, I cross over. Remember, it has to be up, so I'm pulling it across, right? If I just try to pull it across at any point, it is going to bounce around on me. So I wait for it to be up and pull across. And you don't have to watch that. You can feel it. You can feel the pressure pulling back right here. And that's when you can whip it across, okay? Same thing, you feel the pressure when it starts to rise on this end of the swing, and then you can pull it across. So, forward circle, cross, forward circle, cross, forward circle. When you get comfortable with that, then you can go with just one circle on each side. And when you're doing that, you're doing a figure eight. So it's, if you look at this, if I tighten this swing here, it's like I'm drawing a figure eight in front of you, okay? Now, if I turn my back to you so you can see this, so you can follow along, here's the forward circle. Right when it gets up here, I come across. Right when it gets up here, I come across. And you can swing slower so that you can feel this. You don't have to swing it fast. As you get comfortable and feel it, you can swing fast. But when you're comfortable, okay? And then when you're really comfortable, you can keep it going. You might feel like, hey, this is more comfortable for me to do first. That's fine. It's basically one circle and then I cross, one circle and then I cross, one circle and then I cross. So this, you can see, the figure eight is a circle on each side of my body. And there's an X that I'm making right in front of me. And then when I put those shapes together, it's like I'm drawing a figure eight, okay? So that is the forward figure eight in front. Forward figure eight in front. The figure eight is in front, and it's off of the forward swing. If I do the backward swing, now the figure eight is going to go backwards, okay? So the way to think about this is, off the forward swing, it's a downward figure eight. I am swinging down, and you can see this downward motion as I'm making this figure eight. If I go from swinging backwards and cross, so let's look at that. I'm just swinging, and when it gets to here, right here, right there, I cross, which is just the reverse of right there I cross. So it's always on this backward motion here. I cross, and I can swing slow. So I can watch it and feel it, and then as I get comfortable, I can swing a little faster and cross, and cross, and cross. And at first you're going to do all this weird stuff. If you're doing that, you're swinging it too fast for your skill set, or your skill level, I'm sorry. So, bam. And then when I get comfortable, I'm just on a single circle on each side, crossing my body. And you'll see this upward stroke. Okay, so we call this the upward figure eight. Okay, so it's a figure eight in front of me. Off of the forward swing, it's a downward figure eight. Okay, and I can do this with my arm, swinging at the shoulder. I can do this swinging at the elbow, or I can do it tight at the wrist. Different ways to do the figure eight. If I'm swinging backwards, okay, so I'm going backwards, and then I start to cross the figure eight, it is an upward figure eight because I'm striking upwards as I cross. Okay, so upward and downward figure eight in front. I say in front because there is one to the side as well. So if I'm swinging like this towards you, so we did this circle, and we did this circle, now here's a new circle for you to learn. Back behind your back. This gets a little tricky because sometimes your elbow bends out and you'll hit so trained not to do that. See, a lot of times you'll do this and you'll hit your arm. And what you have to learn to do is to get that to swing past. You see how my elbow position is in comparison to the swing? If I'm swinging like this, I'm going to get hit. It's here. Okay? And I'm swinging forward circle. And then ellipse, backward circle, ellipse, forward circle. I could do the same thing on this side. Forward circle, ellipse, backward circle, ellipse to decelerate. So this is a new set of circles for you. And this is a new set of circles to apply here because it takes a little bit more skill. So by the time you've practiced everything else, you should be able to figure this out and it won't be too frustrating. And once I have forward and backward on each side, I can start to do my figure eight. So I'm sideways, forward swinging, I'm swinging to you, and that's a downward figure eight to the side. Okay? And you might say, well, what's the difference between that and this? Well, the difference is, watch when I turn to the side here. That's what I'm doing. I'm swinging it around my arm like that, okay? Which is different than swinging it around here. So this is going to be transitional over here that I'll use, okay? When I need to occupy some space before I decide what I'm going to do with it. So that's why we do this figure eight around the arm, okay? And this is downward. You can see the downward stroke. Upward stroke is just reversing. You can think of it that way. Or you can think of doing your backward circle. Okay, that was forward circle and downward figure eight. Now we're going backward circle, okay? Figure eight. And you'll see that's an upward stroke. So after you've done the body figure eights, you'll be familiar enough to do this. And then when you feel comfortable, you can just do one circle on each side. And when you're doing that, that's when you're getting this nice flow, okay? And then you're able to control that. So that covers the figure eights. Okay, the next thing that we want to learn how to do is, before we start putting all this together in a combination, is how to bounce the nunchuck. Now, the tip is where the weapon does its most damage, okay? So the further away you get from the string, or the rope, the more force gets transferred when it hits an object, right? So if I'm hitting just with the tip here, I'm transferring a lot of force. That's gonna hurt. Even when I'm catching. If I hit with just the tip, it's gonna hurt. If I hit anywhere on my body with the tip, it's gonna transfer more force than if I bounce it right here, okay? And that, you can see, there's a little bounce that happens there, okay? It's not hitting. You'll have to know learn the difference between, see, that's a strike, and that's letting it bounce a little bit, okay? So it's all about how I place this. If I just come down and hit, you see how I just struck there with this tip here? It's just a hit, but if I place it, I get a little bounce. And that's what we want to go for when we start to bounce this around our body. And so the first thing to learn that's very easy is just to bounce it from hip to hip. And you'll see that as I'm moving this, you're seeing my whole body working here, and this looks like there's a lot of power, but really this is what's going on. I'm just placing the tip of the portion that I'm actually got in my hand in the right place so that this nunchuck bounces off my hips, okay? And I can do this all the way down, anywhere I want when I get good, you see? You probably can't see that at that low of the frame. Let me move back. Maybe you can see this. You'll never need to do this, but this is just something you can practice so you get really good at placement. And I can move it all the way up here, okay? So this is learning how to bounce the chuck off of your body. This is a good thing to practice. You can practice bouncing it off the thigh here. See the deceleration? So one swing, decelerate. One swing, decelerate. One swing, I can circle, and then underneath, when I get more comfortable, but that's basically a bounce here and a bounce here. Now look, I'm making a very slow circle. This is the way to learn it. And again, this might not necessarily be the way you're going to always use your chuck most of the time, but this is just to get used to bouncing it off larger parts of your body so it doesn't hurt. And again, we're working with foam chucks, so it shouldn't hurt anyway. But you want to distinguish the difference between that sound and that bounce. It's very different, okay? As you start to move faster, you'll hear a noise, but that's just because we're moving faster, and so there's a little bit more, there is a little tiny bit of impact where the bounce is happening, but it doesn't hurt. And the reason I know this is because I've done this with wooden and steel nunchucks, and it doesn't hurt because we're bouncing here. We're not where most of the force is being transferred through the centrifugal energy, okay? So we're bouncing it around our body. Okay, we've tried these tricks where we bounce it around our leg. You could just hold your leg out there and bounce it around your leg if you want. That's fine. You can learn to bounce it off your arm like this. See, I can go forward and underneath. These are good ways to learn before you start doing this. Now the way to do this is is I'm bouncing it off the back of my tricep, but this actually has to be in a little bit. So the 90-degree angle is here, and then this elbow right here is bent in a little bit, and this comes across so that when I'm swinging, I can get this thing to bounce right there. You can see it's like a catapult. It bounces right off there. Okay, and at first you're going to slam this into your arm because you're just going to try to force this thing to work until you learn to work with it, and then you'll get this nice bounce. This bounce is important to get, and I hold in about the middle of the truck, but you could do it holding right at the edge. Okay, I get more of a, you see where the chuck hits? It's still comfortable enough to bounce, but I get a little bit more of a smack. When I hold it here, if I'm not careful, this will swing up underneath and hit me, okay? Which is why we train with foam chucks. So what that looks like is I'm holding it at the tip, I'm not paying attention to my arm positioning, right? If I pay attention to my arm position, I can hold it there and still get a good bounce. I'm still getting good at where I place it, and it changes depending on where I'm gripping. So if I crawl up the grip, that changes the way that bounces, okay? You want to get good at that because this will happen right here, where it just comes right in front. Let me see if I can get it to happen right there. And this is small enough that it's going to hit me in the face or the nose, but that's why, again, we train with foam chucks. You want to avoid that. So you want to practice your bounce. So I think holding in the middle is going to be the best place, and just getting this bounce. And this bounce is just a single stroke back and bounce forward. And you can see I'm using that ellipse knowledge to slow it down, to decelerate. I'm using that technique. Okay, I can do it tight, but I'm thinking about decelerating. Right after the bounce, I'm thinking about decelerating. And this is so that you can practice this over and over, just coming back and decelerating. I can add a circle if I want. See? So I'm on the upward swing, I'm adding a circle backwards to the bounce and then decelerating. And then I can do it again. Okay? Now, I don't have to just decelerate when I come down, and I don't have just the option of bouncing here. I can bounce this way too. So this takes a little bit more practice. This is where I like to have it out a little bit closer to the edge, because then I can place this better. You can see I'm able to place this better because my arm, if I hold it here, just doesn't bend, feel like a Tyrannosaurus Rex here. I can't get that in there. But I can, okay, enough, especially when I'm wielding double nunchucks, get that in. See, I don't try to bounce it here because of the tightness in my arm. I bounce it a little bit closer to the armpit. And it's bouncing back right here. It's bouncing off of this, almost my lap. Okay, so you'll see, that's when I'm holding tight. That's where it's bouncing, okay? If I hold it a little bit further away from the chuck, I still kind of put it there. You'll find a place that's comfortable for you and your pain tolerance, because you'll sometimes in the beginning be smacking yourself a lot. Once you have that, I can bounce and bounce. I can just do this bounce. Or I can add a circle and bounce. That feels satisfying to do. I can ellipse down, come back, ellipse down, come back, bounce, ellipse this way, ellipse this way, circle, ellipse this way. You start to play with however you want, okay? Then you've got this with the hip bounce, allows you to start crossing your body. Notice my hand stays here. And I'm just bouncing. And you can play with bouncing like this, bouncing this. So this means that right now it's just a bounce. I got a little ahead. Okay, so just worry. This is almost not a bounce, you can see, right? It's really not a bounce. This is a deceleration, and then I pull it across. But it is a bounce when I come back and then up. So it's deceleration, bounce, 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 deceleration, bounce, bounce, bounce. That's what I want you to pay attention to, because that deceleration will allow you to whip this across. You're really almost making a circle and whipping it across, and then bounce back and come back up. Okay? So that is how you bounce. Okay? Then you do that with the left hand. Practice with the left hand, because when you do the switch, you'll be doing it on this side. And notice my right hand is now close to my heart, against my chest, and I'm doing this in reverse. And then I catch, and I come back and I bounce, which is the next thing, catching. So that's the bouncing. Let's go into the catching. Catching is easiest if you hold it somewhere in the middle. Find the range that's good for you. It all depends on the tightness of your shoulder, the girth of your shoulder. And I reach over and I catch. And just like that. Work this at first. See how I missed there? Sometimes you will miss. So I might be swinging and you might see something like that, and that's me actually missing. I meant to catch it, I missed, but it bounced, that's fine, and I catch it on the second. Okay? That's okay. The reason you know how to do all these things is so that you can control this thing even if you don't get exactly what you want. Okay? You don't want to slam it into your hand. You want to catch it, again, closer to the rope. You won't always be able to help that, but that's okay. You're not swinging this as hard as you can backwards to do a switch over. You're only swinging hard in front. So when you're coming back, it should be with enough control that you can catch. Okay? So that's the catch. We're practicing the catch. And then you catch it, and then you know how to make a backward circle. And you catch it. And then you know how to make a crossover to a backward circle, right? Because that's your portion of your upward figure eight. Catch, upward figure eight, part, catch, piece of an upward figure eight, catch, piece of an upward figure eight, catch. You can go right to it. This is a little bit harder. I recommend you stay tighter. If you come out here, you're going to miss like that. When you're going to go right to it, you've got to stay really tight. And you've got to get that circle straight over. So you've got to pull it straight over right away. When you do the circle first, you have better control. Because it can go way out over here and you can pull it back and make it go straight where you need to go. So that's why it's first to practice off of that upward figure eight. You get that circle. The circle before you do this. And then when you're good, you can go right to it. I don't do this too often. But you can practice this for hand-eye coordination, that's fine. Going from transition to transition, that's fine. Once you have that underhand transition, that's the first basic one, okay? Then you can start to put things together. I can do my forward circle, to my backward circle, to catch, backward circle, decelerate, to forward circle, decelerate, to catch. I can do figure eights and catch, figure eights and catch. That catch allows you to just put stuff together. See, there's my bouncing. I'm bouncing. I don't want to do it yet. You know, I want to come over here a little bit and do this. Bounce. Maybe I want to do a couple of these. See, you can do that from the side. And let me show you what that looks like. From the side, I'm bouncing. I'm not perfectly straight like this, but I can stick that elbow out a little bit. Remember, before we didn't want to stick that elbow out to get it hit? Well, when I'm going to bounce, I place this tip right there behind my shoulder, and I let it bounce. And then I can switch, and that's how I can go from here. That's a little bit more intermediate, but you can try it if you can get it. Then that's good. So, that little bounce and changeover, those changeovers and bounces allow you now to practice both sides without having to go like this. Okay, now I'm going to practice this. Okay, now you can do this transition. That's all I'm going to cover for right now, just this basic transition. I'm not going to do this stuff. It's not as important as this or this behind, across the waist. I'm a little too tight these days to get that across the waist. This is the only transition that's really important, because you may need to switch hands. And then you have the tools you need to make this effective. Okay, so let's talk about trapping. Trapping is just, I'm swinging forward, put this under my armpit and I trap it. I use the same principle that I use when I'm bouncing to aim this right there where I want to trap it. Now, if I aim it too far back, if I aim it too far underneath my armpit, I'm going to miss. And sometimes you'll get one of those things. And that's, again, why training with foam trapping. You'll get one of those things if you're holding too low or you're too flexible and you put this way too far behind. You want to put it somewhere right about here, so that this swings up and you can catch it. And remember, you're not swinging as hard as you can and slamming yourself in the armpit. You know you're going to catch it, so you're just catching it. So I'm swinging here and I'm doing all this stuff and I'm doing all, and then you see how I decelerated? I decelerate. I get to here and then I decelerate to my catch. You get good at decelerating pretty quickly and within a range that's tolerable for you in terms of the kind of amount of impact you're taking there, so that you can do it fast and people don't realize you're still decelerating, but you're decelerating. You're not slamming yourself in the armpit, okay? So that is the trap. There is a trap that looks like this. We'll save that for the intermediate because it's not as necessary. This is the only trap you really need to know, right here under the armpit. This allows me to adjust my hand on the chuck. It allows me to take a break. It allows me to be in a position to strike from as I've got the chuck ready. Okay, so this is sort of a ready position fighting stance with the chuck. It's ready to go. It can also be ready to go here too. I can just swing right from there. But this is what people are used to seeing. So that is called a trap. Okay, once you've got the trap and you've got the catch, you can trap, you can catch, trap, catch, switch, practice your figure eights, downward figure eight to the catch. Anytime I want to do the catch, anytime you want to do the catch or the trap, you add a circle. It's hard to go right from there to here. If I'm doing this, it's going to be hard. I always make a circle to align it. It's like an aircraft approaching the runway. They don't just come in from whatever position and land. They actually have to line up with the runway and approach. So that's what you're doing. I'm swinging this all over the place, doing all kinds of things, and then I make this circle to align it. Same thing when I'm doing the catch. I'm swinging this thing all over the place. Whatever I'm doing, I make this circle to align my transition, okay? And then depending on how really comfortable you get, you might be able to go, see, that's always very difficult for me to go right from one end to the other. That's why I like the circle. And that's the best way for you to proceed. Remember, if you're using this in its, as a weapon, you're always striking anyway before you're doing any kind of transition. There's not enough power in this to go to a catch, to a transition. This is a strike, and then you're in position to what we call organize yourself. That is trapping. Now you have all of the components you need to put everything together. Look at everything individually, and I encourage you to be creative. I did not show you specific circle to circle. I showed how transitions could be made, but I didn't say do 10 circles on this side, then 10 figure eights to bounce to helicopter. This part, I want you to be able to look at each of the individual components and figure out for yourself. You see, there's a bounce. You can figure out other bounces. They don't have to just be these bounces that I taught you here. Remember, I was showing you bouncing it off different parts of your bodies. You can bounce it off the leg. Okay? Don't make this mistake and hit yourself in the groin. Okay, don't do this. Bounce it off your leg. Okay? I bring my thigh out. I bring my thigh out. Don't slam yourself in the shin. That's going to hurt. I bounce it right off the inside of my thigh. You can do that. See? I'm bouncing it in 3 different places, right? I'm bouncing it on the back of the arm, the front, back of the arm, under the armpit, and then down. That's an example of just getting creative, and that's what I want you to do. I want you to take each of these basic skill sets and just start to put them together on your own. When you're doing that, you're really developing a deeper connection with the way the force is wielded on this device. Okay? And then I can start to show you advanced techniques, which you may or may not discover on your own. Okay? The last thing I'll show you that's kind of cool is when I am swinging this around, I will swing to a down position like this. Okay? So if I've been gripping somewhere in here, at some point I will be moving this around and creeping it up. You see how I creeped my hand up? Watch one more time. I'll start here. I'm moving this around. I'm bouncing it off. I'm finding ways to creep it up. You see that? Or I could just simply do this and then regrip. Then whatever I want to do, whatever combination I want to do, it doesn't matter. I end here. Okay? Let me get up here so you guys can see. I end here. So here, see how I decelerated? I can bounce, but I like to decelerate, okay? Then I take this finger, this index finger, and I move it around in front of the rope, like that. So close-up is, I move it around and I bend it right there. Okay, sometimes I'll just creep up like that. So the reason I do that is because I go down, and then I spin the rope around the finger. And it puts the chucks into a nice, tidy look and stops them perfectly. And basically, you can see I've wrapped that around my finger. So if I go slow, as I'm swinging, I'm allowing it to wrap around my finger. Usually it will slam into this chuck and make a nice clapping sound, and then I'll catch it. Okay? So, come down and catch it. And when you have two and you're doing two nunchucks, it looks kind of nice because then you just do that kind of a thing. So that's a nice little thing to practice on. How to tidy up an end. I'm switching around, I'm doing my transitions, and then I end. All right, well that concludes the beginning tutorial on the nunchucks. Practice, enjoy, get good at it, have fun.